has been said that all people and peoples are living histories. If this is true, knowing the connections between past and present is critically important for us to understand the purpose of the journey of life. As descendants of the ancient Israelites, we may appear to represent a historical record of slavery and a people who will always be fearful of the enemy. But that's only part of our story. The best is yet to come. Now we know that there are invaluable lessons to be learned from the inherited legacy of slavery. What the enemy meant for our destruction has been working together for our good. Why is it so important for us to know our history? It's because past events help us understand the present. We need to have a sense of how things have been. We also need to understand that there is no single historical record. No, we are a continuation of the historical records of our ancestors. The things that they experienced matters. This is why we have the scriptures. So we need to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. A part of our downfall has been in our failure to remember. We were told to remember certain things and then pass them on to our children. Unfortunately, our ancestors didn't know how vitally important those commands were, and here we are. Many of you have heard of Carter G. Woodson. In 1926, he initiated Negro History Week in the month of February. Of course, it turned into Black History Month. But Woodson said that history is a weapon. It's obvious that it has been used as a weapon against our people. We were given a history that's not our own. We were cut off from our heritage and forced to adopt the culture and customs of our oppressors. And as a result, we lack stable roots. When we sought answers for the many dysfunctions that we saw in our communities, they told us it was because we were cursed, because of the color of our skin, even though they knew that it had nothing to do with skin color. So in that sense, we can see how Carter G. Woodson was right. Europeans twisted scripture. They gave us a whitewashed version of history, and they weaponized it against us. That weapon is still being used today. So I want to share some excerpts from this article entitled Carter Woodson, the Man Whose Work Inspired Black History Month. The link is here if you want to read the entire article. So the author of this article says, everyone says he supports education. No one claims to be a champion of ignorance. After those generalities, however, the disagreements begin. What should be taught and who should teach it? In which settings is learning most conducive? The home, the classroom, private or public? Should parents be involved or shut out? What perspectives in various subject areas should students know about? And which ones aren't worth mentioning? And we know that anything to do with our history isn't worth mentioning. Even today, we can see how hard the oppressors work to keep their version of history intact. So obviously, what we know about the past matters. The article goes on to say, do we teach them what to think or how to think? Is it best to homogenize a nation's educational institutions? Or would we be better and smarter people if we encouraged diversity and experimentation? The issues and the controversies are endless. Even truth and accuracy are not settled matters. Allow me to share the following remark from a man who certainly appreciated the value of a good education. So he's quoting Carter G. Woodson, and the quote says, "When you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. You do not have to tell him not to stand here or go yonder. He will find his proper place and will stay in it. The mere imparting of information is not education." So the author of this article from Center for European Studies, Harvard, asked this question: can we learn from the past? And I will let the author of this article from Big Think, entitled "Why We Refuse to Learn from History," answer that question. It says, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." So says George Santayana, Harvard intellectual whose main contribution to history was to write books no one reads anymore. History is bunk. So Henry Ford says Ford was a high school dropout whose inventive genius transformed history. So the author says both were wrong. History is not bunk. The founders of the United States, men like John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, and Benjamin Franklin, believed that history was the most important subject for all citizens of a free republic to study. Did you catch that? According to these men, history was the most important subject for all citizens of a free republic to study. That should explain to you why it was equally important for them to keep us from knowing about ours. It's fair to say that Europeans erased the human experience of others to promote a fallacy about white supremacy. They tried to destroy important legacies from the past. As descendants of the ancient Israelites, our present condition is directly tied to our history as the chosen people. So our enemies benefited from trying to erase our history. So the history of some is important, but not the history of all. Take a look at the title of this article from Fox 21 Local News in Colorado Springs. This is a day the world is told to remember. They are told they should never forget this. They should never forget the terrible atrocities committed in the name of evil ideology. We should remember the atrocities committed by the Germans in the name of evil ideology, but it's okay to enact laws that will ensure that no one will remember the evil atrocities committed in this nation against our people. So should we even be asking if our history is important? Of course it is. We should be able to learn from the past. Isn't that the reason for studying it? So let's delve into the session regarding the purpose for our journey, because we are supposed to glean something from it, a testimony. Pause and think on that for a moment. When it's all said and done, we should have a testimony, and there is a purpose for our testimony. Let's read this from Revelation 12:10-11. Then I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, "Now salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our Most High, and the power of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brethren, who accused them before the Most High day and night, has been cast down. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives to the death." So this journey of ours is important, Israel. We didn't go through everything we've gone through for no reason. We will overcome the dragon with the blood of the Lamb and our testimony. So, what is a testimony? I want to share this from Merriam-Webster's dictionary so that you get a full understanding of what a testimony is. Because many of us remember the testimony services from church when people would get up and say they wanted to thank the Lord for waking them up and for putting food on the table. Others would share a story about how they were healed or protected from danger. They were testifying about the goodness of the Most High. So let's read these definitions to see if there is more to a testimony. So it says, a testimony is a solemn declaration usually made orally by a witness, under oath in response to interrogation by a lawyer or authorized public official. Have you considered the testimonies that are given in the court of law? It says it's a first-hand authentication of a fact. It's evidence. It's an outward sign or a mark. It's an open acknowledgement, a public profession of religious experience. The tablets inscribed with the Mosaic law is considered to be a testimony. The ark containing the tablets, a divine decree attested in Scripture. Have you considered what your solemn declaration will be when you come under pressure? What's your evidence concerning Yah's goodness? Do you have an outward sign? Open acknowledgement? Can you, under oath, orally declare, make a declaration when the enemy comes against you to accuse you? What's your overcoming story? The purpose for this session is to make you think about your testimony. So as I said previously, we have to learn what has happened before. When we were cut off from our heritage, there was very little continuity for our growth as a nation. So now we have to unlearn the indoctrination of the oppressors and then relearn our true history. More specifically, we have to learn about kingdom living. We are descended from kings and priests. You represent a different kingdom, Israel. Please understand that. It does not operate like this Babylonian system. The ways of Yah are much higher. So we're going to look back at some of the experiences of our ancestors so that we can learn how to stop being fearful of the enemy. We're going to look at David's journey to help us learn some of these lessons. Let's begin reading from 1 Samuel 17, 1 through 3. It says, Now the Philistines gathered their armies together to battle, and were gathered at Soko, which belongs to Judah. They encamped between Soko and Azekah and Ephes Damim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and they encamped in the valley of Elah, and drew up in battle array against the Philistines. The Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, with a valley between them. Now, this is the story about David and Goliath, and most of you know this story, but I want to cover some details here that are often overlooked when this story is taught. This is coming from 1 Samuel 17, 4 through 7. And a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. Now the Philistines were known to be people of war, and most sources say that Goliath was close to 10 feet tall. So compared to a regular-sized man, that's pretty tall. It says he had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. And the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs, and a bronze javelin between his shoulders. Now the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels. And a shield bearer went before him. So let's pause here and talk about Saul, because Saul wasn't what is considered to be a short man. Because 1 Samuel 9:2 tells us that he was high above all the people from his shoulders and upward. But let's just say he was at least 6 feet tall. How would that compare to Goliath? As you can see from the picture on the left, compared to an 8-foot tall man, Saul would have probably been chest level to Goliath. But compared to a 10 feet tall man, Saul would have probably reached his thighs. So that would be short. But was there something else going on in the story other than Goliath's height? Continuing on, we're looking at 1 Samuel 17, 8 through 11. Then he stood, speaking of Goliath, and cried out to the armies of Israel and said to them, "Why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And you the servants of Saul?" Don't miss what he's saying here. He considers himself to be something great, and the men of Israel to be mere servants. So he says, "Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." And the Philistines said, "I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. A question here is, why did no one take the time to pray and ask the Most High for a strategy? The second question is, why did the men of Israel allow him to set the terms of the battle? But keep in mind what is said here. The men of Israel were dismayed and greatly afraid. They were intimidated by what they heard and what they saw. They were afraid of their enemy. So who are the Philistines? And why is it important for us to know about them? Well, in many ways, it seems like we're facing giants right now. We're facing things that seem insurmountable. But I believe there are valuable nuggets in this story that will benefit us in these last days. So let's talk about the giants, because we have to know the enemy and understand his ways. We can't be ignorant of Satan's devices. So this article comes from Newsweek, and it's entitled, "Biblical Philistines and the Sea Peoples. Ancient DNA is starting to reveal who these mystery people were." So it says, the ancient remains of 10 biblical Philistines uncovered at an Iron Age cemetery are helping scientists understand who these people were and where they came from. The results potentially link them to the so-called Sea Peoples, a group thought to have migrated across the Mediterranean and caused a major cultural shift in the region over 3,000 years ago. From around the 12th century BC, civilizations across the eastern Mediterranean started to collapse. It says cities were destroyed and the region was plunged into disarray. At this point, it is believed that a mystery group of seafaring people swept through the region, attacking places like Canaan, Syria, and Egypt. Until now, it was unclear whether the cultural upheaval was driven by internal issues or from the movement of people into new territories. Limited archaeological evidence meant determining the true identity of the Sea Peoples was extremely challenging. It goes on to say there is not much known from the biblical accounts regarding the origins of the Philistines, except an interpretation that has been made regarding the biblical mention of Caphtor that was connected to ancient Crete. This theory again is in line with our findings that point to a southern European source. Keep that in mind. The researchers found that the genetic changes where individuals had a mix of Southern European and Philistine genes did not last. After 2 centuries, these changes were no longer detectable, suggesting that the genes of the foreigners were diluted by the local population over time. Feldman said that because DNA degrades, they are limited in terms of the material available. Finding and sequencing more individuals from this time period would help them get a better understanding of the changes taking place in the region and could help pinpoint the source population of the Philistines. With more data, we also hope to learn more about the Philistines in terms of social structure and about the process in which the European genetic signature was diluted into the local Levantine population within no more than 200 years. So who were the Sea People? Well, this article from dailyhistory.org may provide some clues. It says, of all the peoples of the ancient world, one of the most important but least known is a group collectively known as the Sea Peoples. The Sea Peoples were actually at least 9 different groups who sacked countless cities and kingdoms in the late Bronze Age Eastern Mediterranean region from about 1220 BC until 1170 BC. Listen to this. Wherever Sea Peoples went, destruction followed. As the Hittite Empire, the wealthy city-state of Ugarit, and Mycenaean Greece were just some of the more important peoples who did not survive their attacks. So I'll drop down. It says, most difficult of all for modern scholars to answer is the question, who were the Sea Peoples? The question is difficult to answer for a number of reasons. First, none of the Sea Peoples' tribes were literate when they embarked on their historic raids. So therefore, there is no first-person account that relates the various tribes' origins. Second, since the Sea Peoples were actually several different tribes who only occasionally worked together before going their separate ways, again, their origins can be found in multiple places. It says, still, thanks to the ancient Egyptian sources and work conducted by modern scholars, some reasonable conclusions can be drawn about the origins of the Sea Peoples. Listen, most of the Sea Peoples' tribes were more than likely originated in Europe, and many were therefore Indo-Europeans. More importantly, the names the Egyptians used to refer to the different Sea People tribes provide even more clues that can help answer the question of their origins in Europe and the Mediterranean basin. So this comes from Bible.ca regarding the origin of the Philistines. It says the Bible says that the Philistines came from Caphtor, identified as the island of Crete. Number 2, the origin of the Philistines is the island of Crete and the Aegean Sea area bounded by Athens, Corinth, and Ephesus. And then number 7 is listing Caphtorum as a descendant of Mizraim. So this is a mongrel race of people. There had to be some type of mixing between the children of Ham, Japheth, and an unknown source that resulted in giants like Goliath. Take a look at this next video.
Have a pottery sherd that says Goliath on it, but we've got names, two names that are so similar that, all part of the same family. The right time, the right place, the right kind of language, the right kind of people, interestingly enough. So he's there among them. He's a large man. The Bible makes that clear. Depending on which text, he's 9'9" or he's about 6'6". The Septuagint has a little different twist on it, but either way, larger than most. When we measure the skeletal remains from tombs from the Iron Age, the Israelite period, you really don't get people that are 6 foot. So Goliath was a large man. He was from Gath, the Gittite. He was fighting with the Philistines, whether a Philistine, ethnically Philistine or not. And they decided with the Israelites that they would have this contest of champions. Our champion will fight your champion, and whoever wins the battle.
Yeah, the idea there is we won't fight a war. These two are going to represent us, and we'll all agree whoever wins, you win.
That is not a normal thing that was done in the Canaanite Egyptian world, but that was done in the Greek world. Yeah. The story of Troy, the Iliad, the Odyssey, that was what they did. So Philistines were not original Canaanites. They were not part of that original group. The Bible puts them coming particularly from the Aegean world. So the Aegean Sea is the big Mediterranean Sea, and the Aegean Sea is between Western Turkey and Greece. That part is referred to as the Aegean Sea, and all those islands.
Hundreds of them.
A couple thousand even.
Oh, is that right?
Even that, just small ones even. And they all belong to Greece today, Greek islands today. But from that whole region, from Western Turkey, from the mainland Greece, from the islands, and especially Crete and even Cyprus, from that area, the Philistines were a group of, actually there's a list of 7, like there's 7 nations of Canaan, there's 7 tribes or nations of sea people, people who came in boats from the Aegean area, and they went to Canaan. They also went to Egypt, and there's a famous battle scene that took place at the mouth of the Nile, and we don't know exactly how we relate to when they first settled in Canaan and when they had this battle, and scholars battle about that as to which came first, the chicken or the egg. Either way, the Philistines wind up living en masse as families on the coast of Canaan. And so they're sea people who sailed in on their ships and settled there and did a pretty good job of influencing things for a couple hundred years before the Israelites, really under David's leadership, finally took them out.
So that information is in line with the information we've been covering thus far. But let's go back to the story of Goliath intimidating the men of Israel. And he did it for 40 days. They had to be very afraid to allow it to go on that long. So we need to find out if it was just about Goliath's height. Let's look at this from 1 Samuel 13, 1 through 8. Saul reigned 1 year, and when he had reigned 2 years over Israel, Saul chose for himself 3,000 men of Israel. 2,000 were with Saul in Michmash and in the mountains of Bethel, and 1,000 were with Jonathan in Gibeah of Benjamin. The rest of the people he sent away every man to his tent, and Jonathan attacked the garrison of the Philistines. So we can see that the men of Israel weren't always afraid of the Philistines. Jonathan initiated this attack. So it said, Jonathan attacked the garrison of the Philistines that was in Geba, and the Philistines heard of it. Then Saul blew the trumpet throughout all the land, saying, Let the Hebrews hear. Now all Israel heard it said that Saul had attacked a garrison of the Philistines, and that Israel had also become an abomination to the Philistines. And the people were called together to Saul at Gilgal. Then the Philistines gathered together to fight with Israel, 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen, and people as the sand which is on the seashore in multitude. And they came up and encamped in Michmash to the east of Beth Aven. When the men of Israel saw that they were in danger, for the people were distressed, then the people hid in caves, in thickets, in rocks, in holes, and in pits. And some of the Hebrews crossed over the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. As for Saul, he was still in Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. Then he waited 7 days according to the time set by Samuel, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. So I wanted you to see that something happened here, because Jonathan initiated an attack. But it says the people were in distress. Why were they in distress? To the point of hiding and running away from a battle? I want you to see something. There's an important point that we need to highlight here. This is coming from 1 Samuel 13:16 through 22. Saul, Jonathan his son, and the people present with them remained in Gibeah of Benjamin, but the Philistines encamped in Michmash. Then raiders came out of the camp of the Philistines in 3 companies. One company turned onto the road of Ophrah to the land of Shual, another company turned to the road to Beth Horon, and another company turned to the road of the border that overlooks the valley of Zeboim toward the wilderness. So do you see what's happening? The Philistines were carrying out raids in Israel and getting away with it. Why? Well, let's keep reading and we'll find out. Now there was no blacksmith to be found throughout all the land of Israel. For the Philistines said, lest the Hebrews make swords or spears. So you see that there's something else going on here. As I said earlier, these were warlike people, and they had amassed a significant amount of weapons. The Philistines were heavily armed because they were manufacturing weapons. Let's keep reading. But all the Israelites would go down to the Philistines to sharpen each man's plowshare, his mattock, his axe, and his sickle. And the charge for sharpening was a pim for the plowshares, the mattocks, the forks, and the axes, and to set the points of the goads. So it came about on the day of battle that there was neither sword nor spear found in the hand of any of the people who were with Saul and Jonathan, but they were found with Saul and Jonathan his son. So are you getting the picture of what's happening? The Israelites were hiding in caves and terrified of these people because not only would they have to deal with giants, the Philistines prevented them from getting weapons, the weapons they needed to fight against them. So the enemy wanted to make sure they were defenseless. The men of Israel had to go to their known enemy to sharpen their tools. So on the day of battle, none of the people with Saul had weapons. Saul and Jonathan had weapons. That was it. Let's keep going. Listen to this from World History Encyclopedia. It says archaeological excavations. Archaeologists have excavated many of the cities associated with the Philistines in Israel, as well as some sites in the Jezreel Valley further north. The material evidence includes large halls like the earlier Mycenaean Megaron, a large hall with a central hearth and throne. Early Philistine pottery resembles the Aegean Mycenaean pottery that was decorated with shades of brown and black. The Leon Levy expedition, consisting of scientists from several universities, excavated the Philistine cemeteries. One contained 150 bodies, dating from the 11th to the 8th century BCE. The investigation included DNA studies. Their conclusions found that the Philistines were not native to the area but had similar burial practices to earlier Aegean cultures, where some were buried in round stone-lined tombs which were not indigenous to Canaan. We know little concerning the language of the Philistines. Some pottery fragments have non-Semitic inscriptions. A few Philistine words and names are associated with Indo-European terms, which also could have been learned from Aegean Greek cultures. Now listen to this part. The excavations revealed evidence of town planning and a well-defined olive and wine industry. 200 olive installations have been found, as well as breweries, wineries, and shops to distribute these wares. The Philistines were experts in metallurgy, utilizing gold, bronze, and iron, and the production of weapons. Even the Israelites applied to the Philistines for their iron tools and weapons. Here's another important point that we need to see, and this is coming from 1 Samuel 4, 5 through 9. And when the ark of the covenant of the Most High came into the camp, all Israel shouted so loudly that the earth shook. Now when the Philistines heard the noise of the shout, they said, "What does the sound of this great shout in the camp of the Hebrews mean?" Then they understood that the ark of the Most High had come into the camp. Listen to this. So the Philistines were afraid, for they said, "Yah has come into the camp." And they said, "Woe to us, for such a thing has never happened before. Woe to us! Who will deliver us from the hand of these mighty gods? These are the gods who struck the Egyptians with all the plagues in the wilderness." So they started talking to each other and saying, "Be strong and conduct yourselves like men, you Philistines, that you do not become servants of the Hebrews, as they have been to you. Conduct yourselves like men and fight." Do you see this? Israel was fearful of the enemy, but the enemy was fearful of Israel. Why? Because they had heard about what happened to the Egyptians. They knew the power of the Most High, so they were terrified. But guess what? Israel lost this battle because they were not in right standing with the Most High. Do you see what happens to us when we're not submitted to Him? He will allow the enemy to get the best of us. We have to understand that we have a responsibility here as well. When He says obey, He means it. Our people wanted their cake and they wanted to eat it too. You can't have it both ways. If we want the Most High to show up and fight for us, then we have to be submitted unto Him. Let's look at another example. This is coming from 1 Samuel 7, 7 through 14. Now when the Philistines heard that the children of Israel had gathered together at Mizpah, the lords of the Philistines went up against Israel. And when the children of Israel heard of it, they were afraid of the Philistines. So again, we see Israel being fearful of the enemy. So the children of Israel said to Samuel, "Do not cease to cry out to the Most High for us, that He may save us from the hand of the Philistines." And Samuel took a suckling lamb and offered it as a whole burnt offering to the Most High. Then Samuel cried out to the Most High for Israel, and the Most High answered him. Now as Samuel was offering up the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to battle against Israel. But the Most High thundered with a loud thunder upon the Philistines that day, and so confused them that they were overcome before Israel. And the men of Israel went out of Mizpah and pursued the Philistines, and drove them back as far as below Beth-kar. Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shin, and called its name Ebenezer, saying, "Thus far the Most High has helped us." So the Philistines were subdued. Listen, and they did not come any more into the territory of Israel. And the hand of the Most High was against the Philistines all the days of Samuel. Then the cities which the Philistines had taken from Israel were restored to Israel from Ekron to Gath, and Israel recovered its territory from the hands of the Philistines. Also, there was peace between Israel and the Amorites. So do you see, even though the Philistines were heavily armed, they lost this battle because the commander-in-chief defeated them supernaturally. The Most High defeated them using supernatural means. We don't have to rely on natural means to defeat the enemy. When we are properly aligned with the Most High, we cannot be defeated. This is a lesson we must learn. So we will continue with this story the next time. Today we looked at some of the things that caused our ancestors to fear their enemies. They were facing some other issues in addition to giants and the lack of weapons. But the thing is, Israel should not have been depending on their weapons for victory. The Most High takes delight in giving us other ways to defeat the enemy. We can't rely on their weapons. Your enemy will never equip you with tools that will bring about their defeat. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through Yah for the pulling down of strongholds. And this is why we have to wait on the strategy from above. Again, these lessons we have to understand and learn so that we can be ready for what is coming. And we'll talk more about this next time. But some takeaways from this lesson is that we have to understand that we have a commander over the army of Israel. He is not going to allow us to be victorious apart from him, nor should we be. But in order for him to fight for us, we have to submit to his will. That's the main point for us. So yes, our story is full of trials and tribulations. For many, it seems like it's never ending. We sigh and we groan when we see the constant pain and suffering being reported in our communities. But what I want you to also consider is that we're living in the last stretch of it. This too shall pass. Our ancestors witnessed many wonderful things. It wasn't all bad. So as a people, we have to look at our journey in its entirety. We need to take a chapter out of King David's book. He also endured many hardships. At one point, he was so discouraged that he left the promised land to escape Saul's persistent attempts to kill him. Listen to what he said in Psalm 64. Hear my voice, O Most High, in my prayer. Preserve my life from fear of the enemy. Listen to what I just said. Preserve my life from fear of the enemy. Hide me from the secret counsel of the wicked, from the insurrection of the workers of iniquity, who whet their tongue like a sword and bend their bows to shoot their arrows, even bitter words, that they may shoot in secret at the perfect. Suddenly do they shoot at him and fear not. They encourage themselves in an evil matter. They commune of laying snares privately. They say, who shall see them? They search out iniquities. They accomplish a diligent search, both the inward thought of every one of them and the heart is deep. But Yah shall shoot at them with an arrow. Suddenly shall they be wounded. So they shall make their own tongue to fall upon themselves. All that see them shall flee away. And all men shall fear and shall declare the work of Yah. For they shall wisely consider of his doing. The righteous shall be glad in the Most High, and shall trust in him, and all the upright in heart shall glory. So when it's all said and done, the righteous will rejoice. There is an end date to pain and suffering, but just know that the Most High is causing things to work together for our good. We just need to remember the history of our people and our experiences so that we don't keep making the same mistakes. Everything that happened before we were born is impacting our lives today. So this is why we have to know what happened in times past. So we're going to continue with this next time. If this message has been a blessing to you, please hit the like button, share it, and you're welcome to subscribe if you have not already done so. Join me next time. Be blessed, family.